My dad's new girlfriend threw my 10-year-old brother out of the house while I was deployed. So I showed her what happens when you mess with a military brother. Sup, Reddit. So my dad decided to think with the wrong head for about a year straight, and my little brother almost paid the price for it. All this happened while I was stationed overseas. Grab a snack. This one's a ride. Let me explain how we got here. I'm Hunter, 25 male, been in the army for 6 years now. My mom passed away 2 years ago from cancer, pancreatic. She was diagnosed in March and gone by July. Left behind me, my little brother Noah, who was 8 at the time, and my dad Mark. Mom basically held our family together. She was the one who kept everything running, the one who made sure Noah did his homework and dad remembered to pay bills on time. When she died, everything just kind of fell apart. Dad was a mess for about 8 months. Couldn't cook, couldn't clean, could barely get Noah to school on time. I was home on leave for the funeral and stuck around an extra month to help stabilize things. But eventually I had to go back. The military doesn't care about your grief timeline. I set up grocery delivery, hired a cleaning service twice a month, and made my neighbor Mrs. Hensley promise to check in on Noah regularly. She'd known our family for 15 years and treated him like a grandson. Then Dad met Veronica. She showed up about 10 months after Mom died. Dad met her at some grief support group, which looking back is pretty ironic. She was 42, divorced twice, and put together. Perfect makeup at all times. Designer bags that didn't match her claimed income as a dental hygienist. Nails always done. Hair always styled. The kind of woman who looked ready for a photo shoot while buying groceries. She laughed at everything Dad said like he was the funniest man alive. Touched his arm constantly. What really got me was how fast she started making herself at home. Within 2 months, she had a drawer in the bathroom. Within 3, she had a key. Within 4, she was redecorating rooms and suggesting Dad needed to update his wardrobe because his clothes were dated. Dad ate it up. After a year of barely functioning, having someone pay attention to him again was everything he needed. He couldn't see what was obvious to everyone else. I came home on leave about 4 months into their relationship, and something felt wrong immediately. The house smelled different. Mom's pictures had been moved to less prominent locations. Veronica had rearranged the living room furniture and thrown out Mom's favorite reading chair because it was old and didn't match the aesthetic she was going for. Noah was quieter than usual. When I asked him about Veronica, he just shrugged and said she was whatever. But the way he said it made me suspicious. Kids aren't great at hiding when they're uncomfortable. They just shut down. I tried to talk to Dad about it. Told him I thought things were moving pretty fast. That maybe Veronica was a little too eager to change stuff around the house. That Noah seemed off. Dad told me I was being paranoid. That I was looking for problems because I wasn't ready to see him move on from Mom. That Veronica was wonderful and I should give her a chance. So I bit my tongue. Figured maybe I was wrong. Maybe grief was making me suspicious of anyone who wasn't Mom. I went back overseas and tried to trust that Dad knew what he was doing. That was my first mistake. Over the next few months, Mrs. Hensley started sending me concerned texts. Nothing concrete, just observations. Said Noah was spending more time at her house after school. Said Veronica didn't seem very warm toward him. Said she'd heard raised voices a few times through the walls, but couldn't make out what was being said. I called Noah every week, but he never said anything was wrong. Just talked about school and video games and the book series he was reading. Normal kid stuff. But I could hear something underneath it. Then, in late July, I got deployed to Germany for a 6-month rotation. Standard logistics work, nothing dangerous, but it meant I was 8 hours ahead and couldn't check in as often. I told Noah to call me anytime, day or night. Told Mrs. Hensley to let me know immediately if anything seemed off. 3 months into the deployment, my phone rang at 2 a.m. local time. It was Mrs. Hensley. Her voice was shaking. She told me Noah was at her house, that she'd found him sitting on her porch in the dark with a garbage bag full of clothes, crying, that Veronica had told him he needed to leave and find somewhere else to live, that his father hadn't stopped her, my 10-year-old brother, thrown out of his own home, in November, in the dark. I spent the next hour on the phone getting the full story. Veronica had apparently decided that Noah was too much trouble, too messy, too loud. She'd been pushing Dad for months to send him to boarding school or have him live with relatives. Dad kept saying no, but his resistance was weakening. Every week he gave a little more ground. Every week Veronica pushed a little harder. That night, they'd had a fight about something minor. Noah had left his backpack in the living room. Veronica had tripped over it, and something in her snapped. She started screaming at Noah about how he was ruining everything, how he didn't belong there, how he needed to go find his real family since clearly this one didn't want him. Dad was sitting right there, didn't say a word. Noah started crying and asked Dad if he didn't want him anymore. Dad still didn't say anything, just looked at the floor. Veronica grabbed a garbage bag from under the sink and told Noah to start packing. Said she wanted him out of the house in 20 minutes. Said if he wasn't gone, she'd call the police and tell them he was a runaway causing problems. Dad sat there the whole time, watched his son pack his belongings into a trash bag, watched him walk out the front door into the cold November night, and never said a single word to stop it. Mrs. Hensley had been watching from her window when she saw Noah walk out with that bag. Said he sat down on the porch steps and just stared at the street. She went out and found him crying, asked what happened, and brought him inside when he couldn't answer. By a woman who'd been dating his father for about a year. I sat in my barracks room staring at the wall for a long time after that call. Rage makes you stupid, so I pushed it down and started making plans. Because here's the thing Veronica and my dad apparently forgot. That house doesn't belong to my father. It belonged to my mother. And when she died, she left it to me and Noah through a trust. I'm the trustee until Noah turns 18. Dad's not on the deed, not on the trust, not on anything. He was living there because we let him, not because he owned anything. Veronica had just thrown the legal owner of that house out onto the street, and I was going to make sure she understood exactly what that meant. Getting emergency leave approved took 11 days. 11 days of paperwork, phone calls, and explaining the situation to commanding officers who had better things to do than deal with my family drama. But Danny Hensley had faxed over documentation showing that a minor property owner had been illegally evicted from his own residence, and that moved things along faster than expected. During those 11 days, I stayed in constant contact with Mrs. Hensley and Danny. Noah was staying with them, and Mrs. Hensley made sure he got to school every day so he wouldn't fall behind. Danny had advised me not to tip off Dad or Veronica about what was coming. Said we needed to get everything lined up before making any moves. So I played dumb on the phone with Dad. Called him twice to check in, kept my voice neutral, asked how things were going. He said everything was fine. Said Noah was staying with friends for a bit while they sorted out some behavioral issues. Said Veronica sent her love. I almost asked him what kind of father lets his girlfriend throw his kid out and then pretends everything is normal. But I held it together. Couldn't show my hand yet. Danny, meanwhile, pulled the deed and confirmed what I already knew. The house was in my name and Noah's name. Dad had zero ownership stake. He was basically a guest who'd been allowed to stay out of family courtesy. Danny also did some basic checking on Veronica. Found out she hadn't worked in 3 years, despite claiming to be a dental hygienist. Her previous marriage had ended with her walking away with the house and a chunk of change. That told me enough. She had a playbook. Except this time, she'd miscalculated badly. Dad didn't own what she thought he owned. I landed at the airport on a Tuesday afternoon, rented a car, and drove straight to Danny's office. He had a folder waiting for me. The deed. Notes from Mrs. Hensley about what she'd witnessed. Information about filing a CPS complaint. We kept the strategy simple. Danny said the fastest path was getting Veronica to leave voluntarily tonight, then handling the rest legally. If she refused, we could request a sheriff's civil standby while she packed. I could file eviction paperwork for my father, which would take 30 days. I could file a CPS report for child abandonment, which would create an official record. I chose all of it. Danny made some calls to set things up. Then I drove to my house. It was dark when I pulled into the driveway. The lights were on inside. Veronica's white SUV was parked in what used to be Mom's spot in the garage. Dad's truck was next to it. I sat in the car for a minute, just looking at the house where I'd grown up. Then I got out and walked to the front door. I didn't knock. I had a key. They were sitting in the living room watching television. The room looked completely different. New paint, new furniture, new decorations. Like they'd erased every trace of our family and started fresh. Veronica looked up first. Her face went through about 4 expressions in 2 seconds. Surprise, then confusion, then she forced a smile. Hunter, what a surprise. You didn't tell us you were coming home. I didn't answer her. I looked at my father. Where's Noah? Dad shifted in his recliner. He's staying with friends. We thought some space would be good for him. I know exactly where Noah is. I know what happened. I know everything. The room got very quiet. Veronica tried to take control of the situation immediately. She stood up from the couch and started talking calmly about how there had been a misunderstanding, how Noah had been acting out and needed structure, how they'd been planning to discuss long-term solutions as a family. I cut her off. You've got 30 minutes to pack whatever stuff is actually yours and get out of my house. If you're not gone by then, I'll get you removed for trespassing. She laughed. Actually laughed. What are you talking about? This is Mark's house. You can't just kick me out. I pulled out the deed from my folder, showed her my name, showed her Noah's name, pointed to where my father's name wasn't. This house belongs to me and my 10-year-old brother. Mom left it to us. Dad lives here because we let him. You live here because Dad let you. Dad finally spoke up. His voice was tight. Your mom wanted me to have the house. There's got to be some mistake with the paperwork. Did you ever actually read Mom's will? Or did you just assume everything would work out in your favor? He didn't have an answer. Veronica's face had changed. The polished mask was cracking. She looked at Dad with something between anger and disbelief. I watched her realize in real time that she'd bet on the wrong horse. That Dad didn't actually own anything worth taking. She turned back to me and tried a different approach. Said she understood I was upset. Said we could talk about this like adults. Said there was no need to be hasty. 28 minutes now. Dad stood up from his recliner. His face was red. I'm not letting you throw my girlfriend out of my home. I'm still your father, and you need to show some respect. What respect did you show Noah? What kind of father watches his girlfriend throw his 10-year-old son out and then lies about it? You think Mom would be proud of who you've become? That one landed. I watched it hit him. His mouth opened and closed a few times, but nothing came out. Veronica grabbed his arm. Don't let him get in your head, Mark. He's just trying to cause problems because he never accepted us being together. 25 minutes. Every minute you spend arguing is a minute less for packing. She finally got the message. Stormed off toward the bedroom. I could hear her slamming drawers and closet doors. Dad stood there looking lost, like he couldn't process what was happening. The eviction paperwork gets filed tomorrow morning. You have 30 days to find somewhere else to live. Are you serious right now? You're really going to kick your own father out of the family home? You kicked yourself out the moment you chose some bish over Noah. Veronica left in 23 minutes, dragging 2 suitcases and a garbage bag full of clothes. She didn't say goodbye, just shot me a look of pure hatred as she walked past and got in her SUV. Peeled out of the driveway fast enough to leave tire marks on the concrete. Dad didn't leave with her. He sat back down in his recliner and stared at the wall like he was in shock. I didn't try to talk to him. Didn't have anything else to say. I walked through the house that night, going through what had changed, what was missing, what had been replaced. Mom's pictures were still there, but hidden. I found them in a box in the garage, wrapped in newspaper like they were being stored for a move. Her clothes were gone from the closet. Her jewelry was missing from the dresser. Her books had been taken off the shelves. Veronica had erased her from every room. Noah's room was the worst. His bed was gone. His posters were gone. His toys and books, and the model rocket we'd built together last summer, all gone. There was a desk with Veronica's laptop and a filing cabinet and some generic art prints on the walls. The next morning, I filed the eviction paperwork and drove to Danny's office to file the CPS report. A caseworker would be assigned. They'd interview Noah, me, Dad, and assess the situation. Danny was confident I could get full guardianship. Mrs. Hensley had been keeping detailed notes since Noah started spending more time at her house. Dates and times. Things Noah had said about how Veronica treated him. The night she threw him out. All documented. I picked Noah up from the Hensley house that afternoon and brought him home. Mrs. Hensley hugged me at the door and told me she was proud of how I'd handled everything. Said my mother would be proud too. That got to me more than I expected. Noah was quiet during the drive. Kept looking out the window like he wasn't sure where we were going. When we pulled into the driveway, he didn't immediately get out of the car. Just sat there staring at the house. Walking through the front door, he looked around like he didn't recognize the place. Asked where all the furniture came from. Asked where his room went. Asked where Mom's pictures were. I told him we'd fix everything. Get his room back. Put Mom's pictures where they belonged. Make it feel like home again. We started in the garage. Noah helped me carry the boxes of Mom's photos inside. He unwrapped each picture carefully. When he found the one of Mom holding him as a baby, he stopped and just looked at it for a long time. We spent the next 3 hours putting the house back together. Hanging pictures, moving furniture, throwing out the generic art Veronica had bought. By dinner time, the living room looked almost like it used to. Where's Veronica? Gone. She's not coming back. What about Dad? He's staying somewhere else for a while. We'll figure out the details later. Noah was quiet for a minute. Then he asked the question I'd been dreading. Did he pick her over me? I didn't know how to answer that. Didn't want to lie, but didn't want to break his heart more than it was already broken. So I just pulled him into a hug and held him for a while. Told him that whatever happened with Dad, I wasn't going anywhere. That this was his house and nobody was ever going to make him leave again. He cried for about 10 minutes. A 10-year-old trying to make sense of the fact that his father had failed him. After he calmed down, We ordered pizza and kept unpacking. Small steps, one at a time. Dad didn't go quietly. 3 days after I filed the eviction, he showed up at the house with Veronica in tow. They'd clearly been strategizing, because he came in hot with a whole list of arguments. The house was his in spirit, even if not on paper. Mom would have wanted him to have it. I was being cruel. He was going to contest the will. He was going to sue. His lawyer would sort this out. Veronica stood behind him with her arms crossed, nodding along like she was his personal cheerleader. She'd clearly coached him on what to say. I let him finish. Then I told him to leave. He refused. Said he wasn't going anywhere until we worked this out. So I called Danny on speaker. Danny kept it simple. The deed says Hunter and Noah. There's nothing to contest. The eviction is valid. If Dad's not out in 30 days, the sheriff removes him. And the CPS investigation is ongoing. So any aggressive behavior goes in the file. Veronica grabbed Dad's arm and tried to pull him toward the door. She'd figured out this was a losing battle. But Dad wasn't ready to give up. He shook off her hand and pointed at me. Said I was turning his son against him. Said Noah belonged with his father, not with a brother who was never around. Where was all that fatherly concern when she threw Noah out? What was your plan for a 10-year-old with nowhere to go in November? He didn't have an answer. Just sputtered about how it wasn't supposed to happen that way. How he was going to bring Noah back in a few days once things calmed down. Those few days turned into 3 weeks. You never once checked on him. Never called. 3 weeks of pretending your son didn't exist. Veronica finally managed to drag Dad toward the door. She muttered something about getting their own lawyer. They left, but that wasn't the end of it. Veronica started a campaign with Dad's relatives, called aunts and uncles and cousins, spinning a story about how I'd gone crazy and stolen the family home. Said I was mentally unstable from military service. Said I was keeping Noah from his father. Said Dad was devastated. It worked on a few of them. Uncle Wade called me yelling about family loyalty and disrespecting my mother's memory. Aunt Cheryl sent a long text about forgiveness. So I created my own group chat, added Uncle Wade, Aunt Cheryl, and everyone else Veronica had been talking to. Then I started posting receipts. First, a photo of Noah's room converted into Veronica's office. His bed gone. His posters gone. A filing cabinet where his bookshelf used to be. Then Mrs. Hensley's written statement about finding Noah on her porch in the dark with a garbage bag of clothes. The timestamp showing it was 8:40 p.m. on a Tuesday in November. Then screenshots of the text between me and Dad where he lied about Noah staying with friends because of behavioral issues. His actual words. His actual lies. Then the deed showing my name and Noah's name. The document proving Dad had never owned the house he'd been living in for 15 years. The chat went quiet for about an hour. I watched the read receipts tick up as people went through everything. Then Uncle Wade texted that he'd had no idea. That Veronica had called him crying about how I was stealing the family home. That she'd made it sound like I was having some kind of breakdown. That he felt like an idiot for believing her without checking first. Aunt Cheryl texted that she felt sick. That she'd believed Veronica because she'd seemed so concerned about Dad, so worried about the family falling apart, that she'd actually told other people in the family Veronica's version of events, that she was embarrassed. One of my cousins asked how Dad could have let this happen, asked if the man they grew up knowing had really turned into this person. One by one, the relatives who'd sided with Dad started backpedaling, asked what they could do to help, said they couldn't believe Mark had turned into this. Veronica tried to jump into the chat with her own version, said that I was manipulating everyone, that the evidence was taken out of context, that she'd only been trying to protect the family from a troubled child who needed professional help. Uncle Wade shut her down immediately, asked her to explain what context made it okay to throw a 10-year-old out of his own house. She didn't have an answer. The family chat turned into a pile-on. Relatives I barely knew were texting about how they'd always thought something was off about Veronica, how Dad had changed since he started dating her, how they should have said something sooner but didn't want to interfere. Someone texted asking where Noah was now and if he was okay. I told them he was safe with the Hensleys and that I'd be taking over his care permanently. Veronica left the chat after about 20 minutes of getting destroyed. Dad never said anything at all. By the end of the day, I had 6 voicemails from relatives apologizing and offering to help however they could. The CPS investigation moved forward over the next several weeks. A caseworker named Paula came to the house to interview Noah and assess the living situation. She walked through every room, asked Noah some questions. Noah told her everything. About Veronica gradually pushing him out, about his father not defending him, about the night she threw him out and he sat on Mrs. Hensley's porch not knowing what to do, about how he'd been scared to call me because he didn't want to be a problem. Paula interviewed Dad at the motel where he was staying. Danny got a summary afterward. Dad tried to minimize everything. Said it was a misunderstanding. Said Veronica had been stressed. Said he was planning to bring Noah back once things calmed down. Paula wasn't buying it. She noted that 3 weeks had passed without any attempt at contact, that Dad had lied about Noah's whereabouts, that the home environment had been hostile toward the child. After about a month of interviews and documentation review, her preliminary recommendation came through. Guardianship should be transferred to me permanently. Dad tried to file an emergency motion to block it. His discount lawyer put something together about parental rights. By early January, the motion was denied based on the weight of evidence in the file. Around the same time, Veronica showed up at Noah's school. The office had been warned. I'd given them her photo the first day Noah went back and explained the situation in detail. The principal had put a note in Noah's file. The secretary knew to call me immediately if anyone unexpected tried to pick him up or contact him. When Veronica walked in during pickup time asking to see Noah, the secretary recognized her immediately, kept her talking at the front desk while she called me from the back office, asked Veronica to fill out a visitor form, asked for ID, asked her to explain her relationship to the student, stalled for 12 minutes while I broke every speed limit between home and the school. I walked through the front doors to find her arguing with the principal in the lobby. She was insisting she had every right to see her boyfriend's son, that this was a misunderstanding, that I was the one causing problems, that she was practically Noah's stepmother, and the school had no right to keep her from checking on his welfare. The principal was holding firm, but clearly getting worn down by the performance. When she saw me walk through the door, her face went pale, just for a second. Then she recovered and put on that concerned, sympathetic expression. Hunter, oh good, you're here. I've been so worried about Noah. Mark's been worried too. We just wanted to make sure he's doing okay. See if there's anything we can do. You need to leave. Right now. She tried to recover. Put on that calm, reasonable voice. Look, I get that you're upset with me. I made mistakes. I was stressed. I overreacted. But that doesn't mean I don't care about Noah. If we could all just sit down and have a conversation. You threw him out of his house. You told him he wasn't wanted. And now you show up at his school acting concerned? The principal was watching this exchange with wide eyes. 2 other parents in the lobby had stopped what they were doing to watch. The secretary had come out from the back office. I made a mistake, Veronica said, her voice getting a little desperate. People make mistakes. That doesn't mean, get out. If you come near him again, I'm filing for a restraining order. And I'll make sure every parent in this school knows exactly what you did to a 10-year-old boy. She looked at the principal like she expected backup. Didn't get any. The principal told her she needed to leave school property immediately, or they would call the police. She left, but she made sure to tell everyone in earshot that I was keeping a father from his son, that she was just trying to help a troubled child. The principal walked me to his office after she was gone, asked if there was anything the school needed to know. I gave him the short version. He said he'd make sure every staff member knew Veronica's face, and that she wasn't to have any contact with Noah. I filed for the restraining order the next day. Danny handled the paperwork. It took about 3 weeks of back and forth, but given the documented history and the school incident, the judge eventually granted a temporary order. Veronica was to stay away from Noah, his school, our house, and anywhere she knew he'd be. Meanwhile, Veronica and Dad's relationship was falling apart under the pressure. Mrs. Hensley mentioned she'd heard from someone at the motel that they'd been fighting constantly, that Veronica had started looking for work for the first time in years. The put-together woman who'd seemed so polished was coming apart. Turns out her whole lifestyle depended on someone else paying the bills. When that fell through, so did she. The eviction deadline hit on a Thursday. Dad hadn't moved any of his belongings, hadn't found a new apartment, hadn't arranged for storage. He'd spent the entire 30 days convinced I'd change my mind, convinced that family meant I'd eventually back down. 2 sheriff's deputies showed up at 9 a.m. to supervise the removal. Danny had arranged for a moving company to box everything and put it in a storage unit. Dad would have 60 days to claim it before it was auctioned off. The movers were professional, worked through the house room by room, boxing up clothes and dishes and furniture without wasting time. One of them asked me if I wanted anything set aside. I told him just the photo albums and anything that looked like it belonged to my mom. Everything else could go to storage. I'd taken Noah to Mrs. Hensley's house that morning, so he wouldn't have to watch, but around 9:30, he asked to come back. Said he wanted to see it happen. Said he needed to know it was really over. So I drove him back. We parked across the street and watched the movers carry out boxes and furniture. The leather couch Veronica had bought. The recliner Dad had been sitting in the night I confronted them. The bed from the master bedroom. all of it loaded into a truck bound for a storage unit that would probably never be opened. Noah just watched with this serious expression. I asked if he was okay. He said he was. I'm not sure either of us believed it. Dad showed up around 10 a.m., Veronica right behind him in her SUV. He parked at the curb and got out slowly, watching the movers with this stunned look on his face, like he still couldn't believe it was happening. Veronica stayed in her car at first. The temporary order required her to keep distance from Noah, so she parked well down the block, close enough to watch, far enough to stay out of trouble. Dad walked up to where I was standing by my car. He looked older than he had a month ago, like everything he'd done was finally catching up with him. We can still work this out. Family's more important than legal documents. Noah needs his father. Where was that 3 months ago when Noah needed you? Why do you only care about being a father now that there are consequences? He didn't have an answer. Just stood there, watching the movers carry out the last of the bedroom furniture. Veronica finally got out of her car and walked up the block toward us. She stopped at the edge of the driveway, still keeping her distance from where Noah stood across the street but close enough to talk. Hunter, you're being too emotional about this. Mark made mistakes. I made mistakes. But destroying your family over one bad night isn't the answer. One bad night? You spent months pushing a 10-year-old out of his own home. You told everyone in the family he was troubled and dangerous. That's not one bad night. That's a whole campaign. She started to respond, but something in her snapped. Maybe it was the deputies watching. Maybe it was the neighbors who'd come out to see what was happening. Maybe it was finally hitting her that she'd lost everything she'd been working toward for over a year. She started screaming about how this wasn't fair, how she'd given up everything to be with my father, how I was ruining her life over a kid who'd never liked her anyway, how she'd done nothing but try to help this family, and this was the thanks she got. One of the deputies stepped forward and warned her to calm down, or she'd be detained for disorderly conduct. She didn't calm down, kept going, getting louder, more unhinged, listing every sacrifice she'd made, every compromise, every time she'd put up with something she shouldn't have had to deal with. Dad tried to quiet her down. She shoved him away, called him useless, said she'd wasted over a year on him and had nothing to show for it, said he'd promised her the house would be hers eventually, said he'd lied about everything. That's when it came out. Dad had told Veronica the house belonged to him, said the trust was just a formality he could dissolve whenever he wanted. He'd been lying to her the entire time about what he actually owned. Veronica stared at him with genuine hatred, called him a fraud and a coward, said she couldn't believe she'd wasted her time on someone so pathetic. Then she got in her SUV and drove off, left him standing in the driveway surrounded by boxes, watching his relationship and his housing situation fall apart at the same time. The deputies asked Dad if he had somewhere to go. He gave them a motel address. They offered to follow him there. He accepted, looking more broken than I'd ever seen him. He tried one more time before getting in his truck. Is this really how you want things to end? Can you ever forgive me? You showed me who you are when things got hard. What did you expect? He drove off. The deputies followed. The movers finished loading, and then it was quiet. Noah was still watching from across the street. He walked over slowly. Is Dad gone? For now. Is he ever coming back? I don't know. That depends on whether he can become the kind of father you deserve. Noah nodded. Then he asked what we were having for dinner. I almost laughed. Kids bounce back like that. They feel everything deeply, but they also know when it's time to move on. I told him he could pick whatever he wanted. He chose tacos. Over the next few weeks, things settled into a new normal. The guardianship transfer was finalized without any complications. The CPS case was closed with a finding that I was a fit guardian, and the home was stable. Noah started at his old school again, back with his real friends. His teachers said he was adjusting well, participating in class, making up the work he'd missed. Mrs. Hensley stopped by regularly, and usually brought casseroles. She'd become like a grandmother to Noah, always there with a hug or a plate of cookies or just someone to talk to when he needed an adult who wasn't me. Having her around was one of the few good things to come out of this whole mess. Danny handled the legal cleanup and refused payment for most of his work. Said his mother would never forgive him if he charged for helping a kid who'd been wronged. I insisted on buying him dinner once a month. He accepted that compromise. We found Noah's belongings at a donation center across town. Veronica had dropped off 3 boxes of his stuff the week after she threw him out. We bought it all back for $40. I heard through Uncle Wade that Veronica had moved in with her sister in another state, that she was already looking for a new opportunity. Dad was staying in a long-term motel, working the same job, keeping his head down. He reached out through Uncle Wade a few times, testing the waters. Still not ready to really apologize. still convinced he hadn't done anything that wrong. The family chat had gone quiet, but occasionally someone would test checking in on Noah, asking how he was doing in school, asking if he needed anything. Uncle Wade sent Noah $100 for his birthday. Aunt Cheryl mailed him books every month. About 8 months after the eviction, Dad finally called. Said he'd been doing a lot of thinking. Said he'd been going to a real support group. Said he understood now why I'd done what I did. Said he wanted to be part of Noah's life, if there was any way to make that happen. I told him that was Noah's call, not mine. Gave him Noah's email address. Said they could start with letters and see where it went. Noah got his first email 2 days later. Read it 3 times before deciding to respond. Asked me to look at it before he sent anything. It was one paragraph asking why Dad had let Veronica throw him out. Dad didn't have a good answer. Just said he'd made a terrible mistake. That he'd been so focused on feeling better after losing Mom that he forgot about his responsibilities to his sons. That there was no excuse. Noah wrote back that sorry wasn't enough yet, but maybe someday it would be. They've been talking since then. Slow progress. A lot of hard questions from Noah that Dad struggles to answer. But progress. I don't know if they'll ever have a real relationship again. Trust is a lot easier to break than it is to rebuild. But I'm staying out of it. Noah's old enough to start making his own choices about who he wants in his life. My job is just to make sure he's safe while he figures it out. Our family isn't what it used to be. Can't be. Not with Mom gone and Dad being who he turned out to be. But it's still family. Me and Noah, holding it together. Mrs. Hensley next door, always ready with a casserole or a listening ear. Danny checking in once a month to make sure everything's still good. The house Mom left us is full of her. Her pictures on the walls, her books on the shelves, her flowers in the garden that Noah helps me take care of every weekend. And 2 of her sons, looking out for each other the way she would have wanted. Mom used to say that protecting the people you love sometimes means making hard calls. That family isn't really about blood. It's about who actually shows up when stuff gets hard. She was right, and I think she'd be proud. Guys, we are so close to hit 100,000 subscribers on this channel. If you are not subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing. It really helps hit that 100,000 mark. Thanks for making this dream come true.